Mia's mornings began with the stark reality of her small, dimly lit apartment, the silence echoing the loneliness she felt since her mother's passing. A second-year college student studying business, she found herself increasingly weighed down by financial pressures and the daunting responsibilities that came with adult life without parental support. Her routine was a relentless cycle of classes and work, her social life a forgotten luxury tucked away amidst textbooks and timesheets. Each day, Mia donned her janitorial uniform, a stark contrast to her classmates' casual or business attire. Her job at a corporate building downtown paid the bills, but starkly reminded her of her struggles. The large, glossy floors and the sterile scent of cleaning chemicals were far removed from the vibrant campus life she glimpsed in brief, passing moments. As she pushed her cleaning cart through the hallways each evening, her reflection in the polished surfaces seemed to mock her with what could have been a different Mia, one who could have been just a student, not a janitor. Her interaction with others during her shifts was minimal. Occasionally, she exchanged brief, polite nods with late-working employees or shared an awkward elevator ride with executives who rarely saw past the uniform. These moments, while fleeting, underscored her isolation, deepening the chasm between her current state and her aspirations. One particularly grueling day, as she cleaned an executive's office after hours, Mia found herself pausing, her eyes landing on a framed photograph of a family skiing. It seemed so distant from her own life, filled with financial woes and loneliness. Shaking off a rising tide of envy and sadness, she continued her work, her movements mechanical, her mind elsewhere. "Long night, huh?" The sudden voice made her jump. It was Tom, one of the few friendly faces, a security guard who often worked the same late shift. "Yeah, just the usual," Mia replied, forcing a smile as she adjusted the trash bag she was replacing. "You know how it is?" Tom nodded, his expression sympathetic. "Don't work too hard, okay? Remember, you're more than this job," he said gently before continuing his rounds. His words, meant to be encouraging, lingered in Mia's mind as she finished her shift. They sparked a mix of appreciation and renewed awareness of her stark reality. The simplicity of the statement clashed with the complexity of her feelings, gratitude for the job that kept her financially afloat, and a resentful reminder of her unchosen responsibilities. Back in her apartment, Mia sat at a small desk cluttered with textbooks and bills, trying to focus on an assignment due the next day. The clock ticked loudly in the quiet room, each sound a reminder of the time slipping away, time she wished she could spend studying, resting, or just being a normal college student. Her phone buzzed, a message from a classmate asking about notes from the last lecture. As she replied, detailing the key points, she felt a brief connection to her life as a student, a role often overshadowed by her nightly janitorial uniform. It was a reminder of why she persisted, why she fought through the exhaustion and isolation. The late nights, the constant balancing act between work and study, the loneliness, it all coalesced into a life Mia hadn't chosen but had to navigate. Yet, despite the challenges, she was determined. Her education was the key to changing her narrative, to moving beyond the janitor's uniform and the shadows of corporate hallways. It was her path to a future where her reflections in glossy surfaces would show her not just as she was, but as she could be. This determination, hardened by necessity and fueled by the memory of her mother's strength and encouragement, was what kept her going. It was what made her set the alarm each night, face each morning, and push through each day. During her routine late-night cleaning shift, Mia maneuvered her cart along the quiet, well-lit corridors of the corporate building, a stark contrast to the bustling activity during the day. The sounds of her own movements, the hum of the overhead lights, and the occasional distant closing of a door were the usual background noise that accompanied her solitude. One particular evening, as Mia made her way towards the executive wing, a place she seldom cleaned until very late to avoid disturbing any lingering meetings, she overheard voices coming from one of the usually silent conference rooms. Curiosity piqued, she slowed her approach, her ears straining to catch snippets of the conversation. "Are you absolutely sure this will go unnoticed?" one voice asked, a deep tone that suggested a mixture of caution and intrigue. "The adjustments are subtle enough, By the time anyone notices, we'll have already secured the bonuses and moved on. Another voice responded, smooth and confident, the sound of papers shuffling in the background punctuating his assurance. Mia stopped, her hands tightening around the handle of her cleaning cart. Financial manipulations, bonuses. Her mind raced as she tried to make sense of the words. Her courses in business ethics flashed through her mind, the warnings about corporate fraud and the responsibilities of reporting it swirling in conflict with her position as a janitor. She knew overhearing this was significant, but the implications were confusing. Should she intervene? Could she intervene without risking her job? Mia was well aware of her vulnerability in the company's hierarchy. The thought of bringing up such accusations against high-ranking executives seemed almost ludicrous, a surefire way to jeopardize her employment. Yet as she stood there, hidden by the shadow of a large potted plant, the gravity of the situation settled in. These weren't just abstract concepts from a classroom. They were real, potentially illegal activities that could affect real people. Her heart pounded with a mix of fear and a burgeoning sense of duty. Drawing a deep breath, Mia pushed her cart quietly past the door and decided to continue listening. In the coming nights, she made a point to subtly linger near the executive wing, hoping to catch more of the conversation that might shed light on the situation. A week later, her opportunity came. The same voices convened again, this time discussing timelines and specific numbers. Mia, pretending to dust nearby surfaces, listened intently. "We need to finalize the figures before the quarterly report goes out. Make sure everything looks legitimate, but keep our margins high," the smooth-voiced executive instructed. "Understood. I'll adjust the depreciation accounts and defer some of the maintenance expenses to next quarter to mask the discrepancies," the other replied, his tone now a mix of resignation and determination. Armed with more specifics, Mia felt the weight of what she had discovered growing heavier. She understood enough from her studies to know these were not just unethical practices, they were potentially criminal. Her initial confusion gave way to a resolute clarity. That night, back in her apartment, Mia sat at her small desk surrounded by her business textbooks, the notes from her ethics class open in front of her. She pondered her next steps. Reporting what she had overheard meant stepping into a fraught battle, one she was ill-equipped to handle alone. "Who would believe me?" she muttered to herself, the daunting image of the corporate hierarchy towering over her. Yet, the thought of staying silent, of allowing the deceit to continue unchecked, chafed against everything she believed in. Determined to not let the fear dictate her actions, Mia resolved to seek advice. She decided to contact her business ethics professor, a mentor who had always encouraged her to stand up for what was right, regardless of the cost. "Professor Jacobs, it's Mia. I need some advice about something serious. Something I overheard at work." She spoke into her phone later that evening, her voice steady but tinged with the nervous realization of the path she was about to take. Mia's decision to delve deeper into the dubious financial activities she overheard was not taken lightly. Night after night, as she pushed her cleaning cart through the hushed corridors of the corporate building, her mind raced with both the ethical implications of her discovery and the personal risk involved in probing further. Using her janitorial access as a guise, Mia began to meticulously plan her rounds to coincide with the schedules of the implicated executives. She paid close attention to the timing of their meetings, noting when they stayed late or gathered in hushed urgency. This strategic positioning allowed her to overhear additional fragments of conversations, each snippet adding to the troubling picture forming in her mind. One evening, as she was refilling soap dispensers in the executive washroom, she overheard one of the executives on a call. "Make sure those numbers are adjusted before the next audit cycle. It's critical we keep this under wraps," he said, his voice low but laced with authority. Mia stood silently, her presence unnoticed, as the executive continued, "Yes, push the bigger discrepancies into the less scrutinized accounts. It's only for this quarter." These words confirmed Mia's worst suspicions. The manipulation was ongoing and systematically planned. Realizing the gravity of what she was uncovering, Mia wrestled with her conscience. She knew the right thing to do was to expose this fraud, but she also understood the precariousness of her position as a low-level employee. The fear of retaliation was palpable. Losing her job was a real threat, not to mention the potential for legal repercussions against her if her accusations were not taken seriously. Despite these fears, Mia's resolve strengthened. She began to take discreet notes, jotting down dates, times, and bits of overheard dialogue on a small notepad she kept hidden in her janitor's cart. Each piece of evidence was carefully recorded, her handwriting tiny and precise. One night, while emptying the trash bins in a rarely used conference room, Mia found discarded printouts that seemed to be rough drafts of financial reports. They were marked with corrections and notes in the margins that suggested manipulation of figures. Realizing the importance of these documents, she quickly used her phone to take photos of the most incriminating pages before replacing them exactly as she had found them. At home, Mia organized her gathered evidence, creating a timeline of the fraudulent activities. Her apartment, once a place of solitude and rest, now resembled a small investigation office, with papers and notes spread across her dining table. Feeling the weight of her findings, Mia decided it was time to seek help. She contacted her ethics professor again, her voice tense as she explained what she had found. "Professor Jacobs, I've gathered more information. It's worse than I thought. I have evidence, photos, notes, everything," Mia confided over the phone, her fingers nervously twisting the cord. Her professor's response was calm but urgent. "Mia, you need to be extremely careful. This is sensitive information and you're in a vulnerable position. We need to discuss the best way to proceed without putting you at further risk." They arranged to meet in a quiet corner of a local cafe the following day, away from any possible prying eyes. As Mia prepared for the meeting, she felt a mix of fear and determination. She was about to step into a battle much larger than anything she had anticipated when she first overheard those fateful words. Yet she knew there was no turning back now. Mia sat at her kitchen table, surrounded by scattered documents, her laptop open with multiple tabs of spreadsheets and financial reports. It was late into the night, and the only light came from the harsh glare of the bulb above her and the blue hue of her computer screen. As she pieced together the evidence she had meticulously gathered over the past weeks, a chilling picture began to form. Each document, each overheard conversation, and every discreet photo she had taken of the suspicious financial reports added another layer of deceit to the scheme she was uncovering. It was not just a matter of creative accounting or aggressive financial strategies. It was outright fraud, designed to manipulate earnings and deceive investors. Mia leaned back in her chair, rubbing her temples as she tried to process the magnitude of the deceit. The company's executives were inflating profit margins and shifting losses to obscure subsidiaries, all to maintain the illusion of robust financial health. The impact on small investors, people like her mother who had trusted such companies with their hard-earned money, would be devastating. Her thoughts turned to her mother, who had scrimped and saved, investing in stocks that she believed would secure her future. The memory of her mother's cautious optimism about her modest investments was stark against the reality Mia faced now. The betrayal felt personal, and her resolve to bring the truth to light grew stronger. Mia continued to sort through her evidence, organizing it into a coherent timeline that showed not just isolated incidents, but a continuous, systematic effort to defraud. She annotated the documents with her own notes, highlighting discrepancies and linking them back to specific conversations she had overheard. At one point, she paused, looking at a particularly damning email she had found discarded in a trash bin, printed out and forgotten. The email discussed adjusting the asset valuations ahead of the quarterly report. Mia remembered the night she had retrieved it, the rush of adrenaline as she realized what it was. She had photographed it meticulously, ensuring even the faintest marks were visible. The next day, Mia met with her professor, Professor Jacobs, in a quiet cafe. She brought a condensed version of her findings, organized in a binder. As she laid out the documents in front of him, her hands trembled slightly, not just from nervousness, but from the weight of responsibility. "This is everything," Mia said, her voice steady despite her anxiety. "It's all here. Emails, internal memos, financial adjustments. It's systemic and it's ongoing." Professor Jacobs, who had been listening intently, nodded gravely. "Mia, this is significant. You've done an incredible job gathering this, but it's also extremely sensitive. You're talking about accusing senior executives of serious financial fraud. We need to think about the next steps very carefully." Mia looked at him, her expression resolute. "I know the risks, Professor, but think about the investors. This isn't just numbers on a page, it's people's lives, their futures. Like my mom's, we have to do something." The conversation that followed was a mix of strategic planning and ethical considerations. Professor Jacobs agreed to help Mia contact a trusted journalist who specialized in investigative reporting on corporate misconduct. Together, they discussed how to present the information to ensure it was taken seriously and to protect Mia from potential backlash. As Mia left the cafe that afternoon, her binder of evidence tucked safely under her arm, she felt a mix of fear and determination. She was about to expose a fraud that could shake the company to its core. The path ahead was fraught with challenges, but Mia knew that her actions could prevent others from suffering the fate her mother had, trusting in a system that was rigged against them. Mia found herself in a quiet corner of the university library, her notes spread out before her. She had always considered this spot her refuge, a place where she could immerse herself in study and momentarily escape her other responsibilities. Today, however, the tranquility of the library contrasted sharply with the storm of anxieties whirling inside her. She was faced with a formidable decision: to expose the financial fraud she had uncovered at her workplace, or to remain silent to protect her job and personal safety. Each option carried significant consequences, and as she pondered, the weight of this decision seemed to compress the very air around her. Mia's thoughts raced as she considered her position as a janitor, a role that provided essential financial support but also made her vulnerable. Exposing the fraud could lead to immediate dismissal, and given the power of the executives involved, there might be further repercussions that could jeopardize her future career and well-being. Her hand trembled slightly as she reached for her phone to call Professor Jacobs, needing his counsel more than ever. "Professor, I'm really torn," Mia confessed as soon as he answered. "I know what's right, but I'm afraid of what it might cost me." Professor Jacobs' voice was calm and reassuring, a stark contrast to Mia's tense whisper. "Mia, it's normal to feel scared. What you're considering is brave and fraught with risks. But remember, integrity often demands courage in the face of fear. You're not just fighting for yourself, but for every small investor who stands to lose from this deception." His words resonated with Mia, grounding her swirling thoughts. She knew he was right. Her own mother had been a small investor, her hopes dashed by similar unscrupulous actions. "Thank you, Professor. I just need to think about how to do this safely," Mia replied, her voice a mixture of determination and apprehension. Later that evening, as Mia sat in her apartment, she mulled over her options. The safety of anonymity was tempting, perhaps providing a tip to a financial regulatory agency or anonymously leaking the information to the media. Yet a more direct approach might have a greater impact, ensuring the fraud was taken seriously and acted upon swiftly. Her decision crystallized during a restless night. Mia resolved to not only share her findings, but to do so in a manner that would uphold her responsibility to the truth and to those affected. She decided to compile a detailed report and deliver it to both a trusted investigative journalist and a regulatory body. The following day, Mia meticulously organized her evidence, corroborating financial records with the incriminating conversation she had overheard. Each piece of evidence was a testament to her thoroughness and her commitment to exposing the truth. As she prepared her final report, Mia felt a surge of empowerment. This was more than just exposing a fraud. It was a stand against a system that she believed had failed her mother and countless others. It was a fight for justice. "I'm doing this. No matter what happens, I'm doing this," Mia whispered to herself, a quiet declaration in the solitude of her room. She attached her name to the report, eschewing anonymity for the accountability she hoped it would bring. With the report complete, Mia contacted the journalist and arranged a meeting. "I'll bring everything I have. It's time this came to light," she stated firmly during the phone call. As Mia prepared for the repercussions of her actions, she felt a mix of fear and resolve. The road ahead would undoubtedly be challenging, but she was ready to face it, fortified by her sense of justice and her commitment to doing what was right. Mia's resolve to expose the fraud at her workplace was firm, but as she planned the steps to deliver her evidence to a trusted journalist, her anxiety was palpable. The stakes were high, and the need for caution was paramount. She knew the potential repercussions of her actions, not just for her, but also for the integrity of the information she was about to disclose. Carefully, Mia selected a journalist known for handling sensitive matters with discretion and integrity. Ellen Page, a reporter for a major newspaper with a solid track record of investigative journalism, was her choice. Mia had followed Ellen's work and trusted her commitment to uncovering the truth without sensationalism. Mia reached out to Ellen via a secure email service, drafting her message several times before sending it. She introduced herself as a source with significant evidence of financial fraud at a major corporation, offering a brief description of the evidence without revealing too many details online. Miss Page, I have substantial evidence that points to a pattern of financial fraud at my workplace. This involves senior executives and has severe implications for small investors. I'm ready to share this information, provided that we can ensure the confidentiality of our communications, Mia wrote. Ellen responded quickly, her reply marked by the professional caution of an experienced journalist. Thank you for reaching out. I understand the sensitivity of the situation. Let's arrange a face-to-face meeting in a secure location. Please bring any documents or evidence you have. They agreed to meet at a small nondescript cafe that was frequented by a diverse crowd, making it less likely for Mia to be recognized. Mia prepared for the meeting with meticulous care, organizing her evidence into a coherent package. She made digital copies of all documents, stored securely on a USB drive, and kept the original papers in a locked briefcase. On the day of the meeting, Mia took several indirect routes to the cafe, constantly watching for any sign of being followed. Her heart raced with every step, not just from the physical exertion, but also from the weight of what she was about to do. As she entered the cafe, Mia scanned the room before spotting Ellen sitting in a secluded corner. The journalist acknowledged her with a nod, her expression serious. After ordering coffee, Mia and Ellen got straight to the point. "Here is everything I have," Mia said, sliding the briefcase across the table. She explained the contents methodically: financial reports, internal emails, and her detailed notes on the discrepancies and conversations she had overheard. Ellen listened intently, taking notes as Mia spoke. "This is substantial," Ellen murmured, flipping through some of the documents. "I'll need to verify all this with our legal team and see how we can best proceed with publication to ensure the maximum impact and your protection." The meeting concluded with Ellen assuring Mia that she would handle the information with the utmost care. "We'll be in touch very soon. Expect a call from me. We'll make sure to get this story out safely and effectively," Ellen assured her. Leaving the cafe, Mia felt a tumultuous mix of relief and suspense. She had done her part, yet now she had to wait and see the repercussions of her actions unfold. It was out of her hands, but the anxiety of waiting and wondering about the impact of her revelations lingered. Mia returned home to a restless evening. She tried to distract herself with studies and mundane tasks, but her mind kept drifting back to the cafe meeting. Had she done enough? How would the company react once the story was published? These questions haunted her, but deep down, she knew she had made the right decision. When the story broke early one Monday morning, it hit the media with the force of a storm. Headlines blared from every major news outlet, and Mia's carefully gathered evidence painted a damning picture of systemic fraud at a well-known corporate giant. The articles detailed the intricate schemes concocted by the executives to mislead investors and inflate earnings, all supported by Mia's documentation and testimony. At first, Mia watched the unfolding chaos from the shadows of her small apartment, her identity as the whistleblower still shielded by the journalist's promise of confidentiality. However, as the story gained traction, it wasn't long before her role began to emerge. Details of a young, brave janitor who had risked everything to expose the truth started to surface, and soon her identity was no longer a secret. Mia's initial relief at seeing justice begin to manifest was quickly overshadowed by a growing sense of vulnerability. Reporters began seeking her out, eager to get a personal account from the young woman who had single-handedly brought a corporate behemoth to its knees. Her phone buzzed incessantly, her email filled with interview requests and messages ranging from supportive to outright invasive. As she navigated this new reality, Mia felt the weight of her newfound visibility. She was not prepared for the spotlight, nor for the scrutiny that came with it. One afternoon, as she returned home from class, she found a group of reporters waiting outside her apartment. The sight of microphones and cameras thrust in her direction as she approached made her heart race. "Mia, can you tell us what motivated you to take such a big risk?" one reporter asked, shoving a recorder closer. "Were you aware of the consequences when you decided to expose the fraud?" Another chimed in. Mia, overwhelmed and unprepared for such an onslaught, retreated without answering. She hurried inside, her hands shaking as she closed the door behind her. The safe haven of her apartment felt suddenly fragile, the walls too thin against the world outside. That evening, Mia sat on the edge of her bed, her mind a whirlwind of anxiety. The public's reaction was largely supportive, her actions hailed as heroic by many, but the exposure brought with it a palpable sense of risk. She worried about retaliation from those she had exposed, about the potential legal ramifications, and about how this newfound fame might impact her future. The phone rang, piercing her thoughts. It was Professor Jacobs, checking in after seeing the day's events unfold. "Mia, how are you holding up?" he asked, his voice laced with concern. "It's a lot, Professor," Mia admitted, her voice faltering. "I knew it would be big, but I didn't expect all of this. It's overwhelming. Listen, Mia, you did something incredibly brave, and it's natural to feel overwhelmed. But remember, you're not alone in this. You've done the right thing, and there are many who stand behind you," Professor Jacobs reassured her, his words a balm to her frayed nerves. Mia took a deep breath, drawing strength from his support. "Thank you, Professor. That means a lot to me." In the days that followed, Mia began to take cautious steps to reclaim her sense of control. She agreed to a few carefully selected interviews, each time emphasizing the importance of corporate accountability and the protection of investors. With each appearance, her confidence grew, as did her resolve to use her voice to effect change. Though the journey was fraught with challenges, Mia was learning to navigate her new role not just as a whistleblower, but as an advocate for transparency and ethics in business. The initial shock had given way to a steady determination to turn her ordeal into an opportunity for advocacy and education. As the repercussions of Mia's whistleblowing unfolded, she began to feel the chilling effects of her decision. While the public's reaction was overwhelmingly supportive, there were other, more sinister responses that emerged from the shadows. Unnamed corporate figures, whose interests had been severely jeopardized by the exposure, started to exert a quiet but unmistakable pressure. It began subtly: strange cars parked near her apartment at odd hours, hang-up calls late at night, and anonymous emails warning her to be cautious. These occurrences soon escalated into more direct threats, leaving Mia to wrestle with a constant undercurrent of fear. One evening, Mia returned home to find a plain envelope slid under her door. Inside, there was a single piece of paper with the typed message, "Be careful what you stir up. Not everyone likes the truth." The message was clear, and its implications terrifying. Mia's hands trembled as she read and reread the note, the words etching a deep chill into her spine. Feeling vulnerable and exposed, Mia installed extra locks on her doors and began varying her routes to and from campus. She also reached out to Professor Jacobs, seeking advice on how to handle the threats. "Professor, I'm scared," she confessed during one of their phone conversations, her voice strained with the stress she was enduring. "Someone's sending me threats. I don't know if I'm just being paranoid, but I feel like I'm being watched." "Mia, you need to take this very seriously," Professor Jacobs responded gravely. "I'm going to help you get in touch with the police so you can report these threats. It's important to make this official, to have a record of what's happening." With the professor's assistance, Mia filed a report with the local police, who advised her to keep a log of any suspicious activities and ensured regular patrols in her neighborhood. Despite these precautions, the sense of isolation deepened. Friends and acquaintances began to keep their distance, wary of being associated with someone who had drawn such powerful adversaries. This isolation took a toll on Mia's emotional well-being. Nights were the hardest. Every sound seemed amplified, every shadow a potential threat. Her academic performance began to suffer as she struggled to concentrate, her thoughts constantly darting to who might be lurking around the corner. During one particularly difficult night, Mia reached out to Ellen, the journalist who had helped her expose the fraud. "Ellen, how do you deal with this? The fear, the threats?" she asked, seeking not just practical advice but also reassurance from someone who understood the dangers of confronting powerful entities. "It's not easy, Mia, but you find strength in the truth and in knowing you've done the right thing," Ellen replied, her voice steady and reassuring. "And remember, you're not alone. You have allies, and we're all here to support you." Gradually, Mia found small ways to cope with her anxiety. She took up running, which helped to clear her mind and relieve stress. She also began attending a support group for whistleblowers, where she met others who had gone through similar experiences. Their stories and support provided a measure of comfort and a reminder that she wasn't facing this battle alone. Despite the ongoing threats and the emotional toll they exacted, Mia remained resolute. She knew that the path she had chosen was fraught with risks, but it was also the path toward integrity and justice. Each step forward was a reaffirmation of her commitment to stand against corruption, no matter the personal cost. Several months after Mia's initial revelations, the legal ramifications for the executives involved in the fraud began to materialize. Investigations led by financial regulatory authorities culminated in a series of arrests and public trials that captured media attention nationwide. The evidence Mia had provided proved crucial, underpinning much of the case against the accused executives. Sitting in the back of the courtroom, Mia watched as the legal process unfolded. She saw the once confident executives, now diminished and anxious, as they faced the consequences of their actions. The judge delivered harsh sentences, reflecting the severity of the fraud and the betrayal of trust it entailed. Each sentence served was a vindication of Mia's efforts and a public affirmation that justice, though sometimes slow, was achievable. Mia felt a profound sense of relief as she left the courthouse. The burden of proof had been heavy, but she had carried it, driven by a belief in right and wrong that her mother had instilled in her from a young age. As she stepped out into the fresh air, she allowed herself a moment to appreciate the gravity of what she had accomplished. The knowledge that her actions had prevented further deceit and protected countless small investors filled her with a quiet pride. However, her satisfaction was tempered by a lingering worry about her future. The exposure of the fraud had made her a public figure, admired by many, but also a potential target for those who resented her role in the downfall of powerful figures. Mia knew that her life could not simply return to how it was before. The experience had altered her trajectory irrevocably, both professionally and personally. Later that week, Mia met with Professor Jacobs, who had been her steadfast supporter throughout the ordeal. They sat in his cluttered university office, surrounded by stacks of books and papers. "You've done something remarkable, Mia," Professor Jacobs said, his voice earnest. "But I know it's not without cost. How are you feeling about everything now?" Mia paused, considering her words. "I'm relieved it's over, and I'm proud of what I've done. But I'm also anxious about what comes next. I feel like I'm at a crossroads and every path looks uncertain," she confessed. Professor Jacobs nodded understandingly. "It's natural to feel that way after what you've been through, but remember, you've shown incredible resilience and integrity. Those qualities will guide you forward, whatever you choose to do." Their conversation turned to her future, discussing potential career paths and opportunities. Mia was keenly aware that her experience had given her a unique perspective on corporate ethics and accountability. Professor Jacobs encouraged her to consider roles that could leverage her knowledge and experience, perhaps in regulatory bodies or as part of ethics oversight committees. As Mia left the office, she felt reassured, but aware that the road ahead would require the same determination and courage she had shown so far. The landscape of her life had changed, and she would need to navigate it with care. But she was not without direction. The values that had guided her actions were still her compass, and she was resolved to continue making a difference, advocating for transparency and justice in whatever form that might take. With these thoughts, Mia stepped back into her daily life, ready to face the challenges and opportunities that lay ahead, fortified by the knowledge that she had acted according to her conscience and had made a real impact. Several months after the trial and the hectic flurry of media attention, Mia found herself in a quiet corner of the university library, much like she had before the whole ordeal began. But now, the weight of her actions and their outcomes filled the air around her, mixing with the musty scent of old books and the quiet rustle of turning pages. She was no longer just a student. She was someone who had taken a stand, made a difference, and was now navigating a life transformed by her courage. As she sat studying for her finals, Mia reflected on the journey she had undergone. She thought about the risks, the sleepless nights filled with worry, and the overwhelming support that had buoyed her when she felt most alone. It had been a harrowing experience, but also a profoundly empowering one. She had exposed a truth that needed to be seen, and in doing so had learned a lot about the world and herself. "I never knew how strong I was until being strong was the only choice I had," Mia muttered to herself, paraphrasing a sentiment she felt deeply connected to. This reflection was interrupted by her friend Lisa, who approached with a gentle smile. "Hey Mia, how are you holding up? Ready for the finals?" Lisa asked, placing her books down on the table. Mia smiled, appreciating the normalcy of the question. "Yeah, getting there. It's been a lot, but I'm feeling ready to close this chapter and start the next." Lisa nodded understandingly. "What you did was amazing, Mia. You're like a hero to a lot of us here." Mia felt a flush of pride, but quickly tempered it with humility. "Thanks, Lisa. It doesn't really feel that way. I just did what I felt was right. It's important to stand up for what you believe in, even if it's tough." Their conversation shifted to plans for after graduation. Mia shared her aspirations, which had been shaped by her recent experiences. "I'm thinking about going into regulatory work or maybe law," Mia explained. "This experience has shown me how much impact those fields can have, and I think I could make a real difference." Lisa listened intently, her eyes bright with admiration. "With your determination, I have no doubt you'll do great things, Mia." As the semester drew to a close, Mia continued to balance her studies with her newfound role as a speaker on ethics and accountability. She was invited to panels and discussions where she shared her story and the importance of integrity in business. Each engagement strengthened her resolve and her belief in the impact one person could make. Looking forward, Mia was optimistic. She planned to finish her degree with the same dedication with which she had tackled the corruption at her workplace. Beyond that, her future seemed filled with possibilities. She envisioned herself working to ensure that other corporations acted ethically, protecting the interests of the public and preventing the kind of fraud she had uncovered. In quiet moments alone, Mia often reflected on the power of individual integrity. She had learned that one voice could echo far beyond the walls within which it first spoke, that truth had a power all its own, and that standing for what was right was sometimes a difficult, but always a rewarding path. As Mia prepared for her final exams, she felt a profound connection to her past self, the young woman who had nervously listened outside a conference room, not knowing the journey she was about to embark upon. She was grateful for her own strength and for the support of those who had helped her along the way. Mia was ready to move forward, her integrity intact, her spirit undeterred, and her life forever changed.